Listen up, folks. Let's go. All right. Yep. No, he's not here today. I got 0 for 0. Hey, listen up. Right here. Don't mind that thing, a tea bag demo. I used to kind of start the class and I forgot to bring a tea bag. The tea bag demo really just illustrates that that something like a tea bag, number one, the bag itself has holes in it, and when you're making tea, it only allows certain things in and out, right? So if you think about a tea bag, you put it in water, those holes allow the water to come in, right? And those holes also allow the tea to come out. But the leaves, which are big, the tea leaves, they stay inside the tea bag. They can't get out because the holes aren't big enough. We have a very similar thing happening when a cell takes in molecules for them to use as food or expels molecules as waste. We just set up our kind of artificial cell. And we've got two types of molecules that are going to be dealing with in our artificial cells. Number one, we've got the starch on the inside, and starch molecules are fairly big. Starch is made up of a bunch of sugar molecules kind of stuck together. So starch molecules tend to be big. The other molecule we're dealing with is iodine, I2. They're quite tiny. They're small iodine molecules. And we've put them in the extracellular fluid. So we're going to see if we get any action. We see if we get any molecules moving across the bag. And again, like I said, that's what we want to deal with. So let's write down here that the cell membrane controls the substances that enter and exit the cell. And please draw a very simplistic cell with that outer surface, the outer surface being the cell membrane, kind of like our bag, which is the outer surface. All right? Again, extracellular fluid. That's the liquid that surrounds the cell. What part do you think that big dot on the inside of my little simple cell is? The nucleus. Correct. What do you think the white part in my simple cell represents? All that stuff that's in there. Yep. The cytoplasm. So this is a very simplified cell. It only has the three organelles: the membrane, the cytoplasm, and the nucleus. My simplified cell that we just built, that you guys built, is even simpler. It doesn't have a nucleus. I guess we could have stuck something in there for the nucleus for fun, but we didn't. So what we want to talk about is how substances get in and out of the cell. And there are two main processes. Again, I'm not sure where people are writing. Some people are writing ahead using their devices. Just let me know if you're still writing on the slide and we can wait. For those who are writing ahead using their devices, when you get to a cell that talks about why do cells divide, you don't need to go there. That's what we're going to do tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to do another activity and talk about why then cells divide. Am I good to go? Good? Almost? Okay. So what takes place? Hold on one second. Yeah, we want you to write that. In terms of our cells, substances are moved in and out of the cell continuously, and they even happen at the same time. Some things are going out while some things are going in. You can think of it almost like, you know, like a mall or something. People are coming out as people are going in. Yeah, a highway in and out of the city. Yep, if we're doing the city analogy. Yep. Substances that tend to get moved, nutrients. Nutrients count as substances other than carbon dioxide and water. So there's some elements that our bodies use, magnesium, there's a little bit of magnesium used, all kinds of elements. They would be called nutrients. Wastes, CO2 is the biggest waste, right? It's the thing that is being released ultimately into your blood, which then ultimately gets to our lungs, and then we exhale it. Glucose, if we're talking about animal cells, we use glucose. The glucose has to come in so that our cells have food to work with. If you're a plant cell and you're producing glucose, then it could be going out to be stored, say, in something like a root, like a potato or something like that. Proteins are specialized molecules that do specific jobs. And the two ways in which things are moved are through diffusion, if we're dealing with chemicals, and osmosis, if we're dealing with water. Okay? So when we're moving things other than water around, we call the process diffusion. And when we're moving water around, we call the process osmosis. Am I good to go on that slide? Okay, so let's talk about the first one, diffusion, and I'm just going to bring the whole thing up here, and I'll help you and explain to you what I want you to draw in terms of diffusion here. So just write down what it means, and then I'm going to draw a picture on the board with you, and that will guide you on how to draw it. And I'm going to draw it very similar to that. I'm going to put a membrane here, just a dashed line, and then I'm going to draw, and I'll explain to you how to draw it. So you can see there it says, the movement of a substance from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. Now, we've all experienced diffusion. Yes, it's happening in our cells, but we've all, I'm sure, came across a situation that you weren't really sure that it was diffusion, but it actually was. Let me give you an example. I'm sure some of you have a friend, or perhaps yourself, and you keep in your locker some container of who knows what, Axe, I don't know, some kind of odorous material. Body spray. Yep. Now, how do you know whether someone has applied an excessive amount of that substance just by them entering the room? Because they stink. But even if they stood at that corner of the room and just stood there, eventually in the far corner of the room, you would know this. I'm sure you've experienced that before. After a while, the odor gets to you. You know what I'm talking about? That's diffusion. The odorous material on the body of the person who uses their body spray excessively is high concentration. There's lots of those molecules right close to the surface of their skin because it's actually evaporating off of their skin. What is happening is those molecules are evaporating, which means there's lots of it. It's a high concentration. And just naturally, and it's not necessarily air currents, there doesn't have to be an air current in the room. Just naturally, eventually, that molecule will get spread throughout the room, and you will experience that molecule on the other side of the room. So it turns out that just naturally, molecules that have a large concentration will ultimately spread out and completely cover the space in which it's in. Another place that you may have experienced it, and I really don't know whether you've seen it, if you were to take a drop of food coloring, and just a drop, and just put it in a glass of water, that drop, you would be able to see it as it enters the water. It would sit there. And if you walked away and you came back about 2 or 3 hours later, you'd notice that the drop was gone, and the whole body of the water would then turn a little bit, well, let's say blue, if we were using blue food coloring. So that molecule, even though you didn't stir it, would slowly spread itself out and cover the entire space of the molecule. All right. So that's called diffusion. So how would I draw this on the picture? I would simply draw lots of dots on one side. So lots of dots on one side. All right. Representing a high concentration. High concentration. And then just draw a few dots over here on the other side. That represents low concentration. And put an arrow across from some of these dots that has them moving through that membrane. So this line is kind of representing the membrane. All right? Now, in a cell, there's always going to be a low concentration on the inside because the cell is using it up. Let's say that that was oxygen that the cell needs. The cell would keep using the oxygen up on the inside, and therefore there would always be low concentrations on the inside because it's using it up. So as it uses up that oxygen, any oxygen that's out here will slowly just work its way in, and it'll just keep working its way in as it's being used. If it was something like carbon dioxide that's being produced inside the cell, there'd be lots of carbon dioxide inside the cell. There would be little carbon dioxide on the outside, and it would diffuse out. So as the oxygen is diffusing in, because it's going from high to low, the carbon dioxide will diffuse out, because it's going from high to low. Whenever you've got a high concentration of something, it's going to always spread into low concentration. Notice I only drew the dots, and I didn't draw what was in between them. The stuff that's in between the dots, it could be air, like when someone comes in with Axe and that odor goes through. Or it could be water, like the drops of the food coloring in the water. Or it could be cells, the fluid that's outside of the cell compared to the fluid that's on the inside of the cell. Okay, so that is diffusion. There's a link there to a really bad animation. I looked at it, it's bad, so we're not going to look at it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what can diffuse. So go ahead and write that underneath your picture. But don't bother drawing that picture there. It's not a big deal. This is just putting it in a cellular sense. No need to draw it. Food and O2 will diffuse in things that the cell needs. Because the cell is using it up, it keeps the concentration low on the inside. The food comes in, it gets used up, the O2 gets used up, so it just keeps diffusing in. There's always going to be a higher concentration on the outside than on the inside. Waste products, CO2 and other waste molecules, because they're being produced in the cell, there's going to be lots of it inside the cell, and it's going to automatically leave. It doesn't necessarily enter on one side and leave on the other side. That's just kind of a representation. They're going to meet each other as they pass through the little holes in the membrane. Some will be heading out and some will be heading in. Yep. Story? You are talking then currently about probably our immune system and how white blood cells can attack the bacteria cell or something like that. We will get to that when we talk later on about the body systems. So for me to describe it now wouldn't make any sense because we're not quite there yet. But we will be talking about that later on. Okay? So we'll get to it. We'll get to it. Okay. So that's how chemicals move in and out. Next, osmosis. Again, I am going to, oh, that picture overlaps things. What is going on here? Okay, I'm going to back that up, get rid of that picture. I will draw a picture on the board for you. Water is the most important molecule in living things, whether it's our bodies or whether it's a piece of celery or whether it's any other animal. It doesn't make any difference. Water is the most important thing. We have to have water to have these things be dissolved in. Now, water can also diffuse. And it will always diffuse in an area to dilute whatever is there. It'll always diffuse to where there's a lot of stuff. Now, I'm going to use the term salt. All right? Even though it's not necessarily salt, it could be any molecule, but I'm going to use the term salt because we know what a high concentration of salt is like. We know that if you put some salt in some water, it tastes salty. And if you put lots of salt in water, it tastes really salty. All right? And so the reason I've used the term salt is to help us kind of visualize what's taking place. So osmosis is the diffusion of water across a membrane from a low salt concentration to a high salt concentration. Water always wants to go where there's lots of salt to dissolve it and make it dilute. All right? You may have experienced this if you've ever eaten salty popcorn or you've eaten a lot of sunflower seeds in a day. Let's say you're playing a ball tournament and you're eating sunflower seeds all day. What happens to your lips after you eat a lot of salty popcorn or salty sunflower seeds all day? They dry out. They dry out. The cells in your lips, they've got water in them. You put concentrated salt on the surface of your lips, the water will go from inside the cells on your lips, where there's not a lot of salt, to outside, where there is a lot of salt, to try to dissolve that salt. In the end, it dissolves the salt. You can tell because you can taste it on your tongue, and it goes down you swallow it, you swallow the salt. But in the end, your lips have given up its water because the water has moved out to where there's a high concentration of salt. It dries out your lips because of this process called osmosis. Okay? So I'm going to try to draw a picture here, and actually, I'm going to, what picture have we got on the next slide? High to low, hold on. Yeah, I'm going to draw a picture. I'm going to draw it on the board here. Now, it's going to be different than this one, because notice here, I've only drawn the molecules that are moving due to diffusion. I have to, in my next picture, draw some water molecules as well. So let's get rid of this one. And I'm going to use a blue piece of chalk to represent the water molecules. You guys could probably use two different shapes. So in the picture that I want you to draw a membrane again, okay? And I'm going to use blue and orange. I'm going to make the orange ones filled in, okay? I'm going to have them filled in. And I'm going to make the blue ones circles so that if you're doing it with a pencil, you can distinguish between them, okay? And I'm going to put here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 circles. I've done 10 circles on purpose, okay? And you'll notice here I put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 dots. I don't know if you guys put 6 dots, or maybe you got 7 dots, or maybe 10 dots. It really doesn't matter. Maybe I'll go 7, 8. I'll go 8 for no reason, just to make it distributed, okay? I want the same water to be on the outside. So I'm going to put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm going to put 10 circles over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. In other words, I've got 10 worth of water, okay? This time, though, I'm going to put less of the orange dots. This time, I'm only going to put 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. See how I did that? Okay. So if the yellow is salt and the blue is water, how would you describe the salt concentration on this right-hand side compared to the salt concentration on the left-hand side? Yep. This one is low, right? Low salt concentration. There's not very many salt molecules there. High salt concentration. There's lots. Osmosis deals with the movement of water. Don't worry about the salt. Don't worry about the movement of the salt. Where is the water going to move? Which way will the water go? Don't mind that picture. I've got it different. Where does the water want to go? From what to what in terms of the salt? Yep. It wants to go to high concentration salt. So the water will move that way. The water will move to the high concentration of the salt, and it will be pulled out of the cell. If this was the cell membranes on your lips, lots of salt on the outside of your lips from eating the popcorn, the water moves out of the cells on your lips. You got dry lips after eating the popcorn. Okay? All right? So osmosis is the movement of water. No need to draw these examples down. Let's take a look here. Here we've got some fake cells. So no need to write this. So here's the cell membrane. There's our nucleus. There's some organelles. Here we've got a vacuole. It's a big hole which has some water molecules in it. And keep in mind, this is the transport of substances all around the entire cell membrane. So here we've got it all around it. And I'm saying, look at, there's not much water in there. There's lots of extra water in here. This is going to be high concentration. So in this example, they're saying that water is moving in. If we're talking about water moving in, what is this? What is this process if we're talking about water moving into the cell? What is this process called if we're talking about the movement of water into the cell? Yep. Osmosis. Osmosis deals with the movement of water. So because water is moving into the cell, this is osmosis. Okay? Because osmosis deals with the movement of water. Here I've got another kind of cell, and these dots are oxygen molecules. Yes, in reality, the oxygen will be all around the cell. You can see here, I've got lots of oxygen out here and only a few oxygen in here. If that oxygen then moves into the cell because it's going from high to low concentration, what process is this? When we have oxygen moving into the cell, what's the process? Brett, you got 50-50, man. 50-50. What moves? We'll take a look at osmosis in your note. Find osmosis right up there in your note. It's the movement of water. Is this water moving? Here, look at this. Says oxygen molecules. No. So what is this called if we're moving oxygen molecules? Diffusion. It's diffusion if we're moving oxygen molecules. Okay. So at this point, you'll notice here, my next says, what about large particles? Oh, I do want you to write this down. This is important. And then what's my next one? Why are we made up of so many cells? That's tomorrow's lesson. So please write this last statement down. Write this last slide down. Then we'll watch our video, and then we will finish off our. We'll take a look to see if our cells have done anything interesting. There are some molecules that are really, really big that cannot get into the cell. They don't fit through the holes. Some cells have specialized structures that will take the big molecules in. It's called active transport. The molecule actually has almost like guard cells that when a big molecule comes along, it can grab it and then it can bring it in, open a hole and bring it in. What we've been talking about today does not involve any active work by the part of the membrane. It just kind of goes through the holes all by itself. So for the small ones, they don't need any help. They just go through as long as the concentration is correct. For big ones, they do need some help. They need assistance, and we call it active transport.